too many times an emotion can come up and overwhelm us and consume us like a monster. And suddenly you're fighting this monster, and you're not really, you don't even understand it. You don't even know what the monster is or how you're dealing with it. And my psychiatrist decades ago said the same thing. One time the hair on the back of my neck was going up and I was really mad, and he finally helped me see the somatic signs. So you have the body has signs like hair going up on the back of your neck, or your fists clenching, or your heart beating, or your chest being constricted, or what. You have all these signs, physical signs of emotion. And then the emotion can come in, really cloud things up and take away your judgment, my judgment. It could take away my judgment. And I think that the key is being able to practice mindfulness, because you can't practice it when you're mad, right? You can't, when you're all mad and angry or hurt or sad or whatever it is, you can't go, oh, hey, this is a great time for me to be mindful. It's too late at that point, right? You got to practice it and practice it and practice it. And then when it comes up, you can be like, oh, I'm going to sit here with these feelings and these emotions and see what's going on right here. Because
welcome to the Daily Soul Bytes show. I am your host, Bola Abimbola, frequency alchemist, energy practitioner, and life coach. Daily Soul Bytes is where we bring together authors, coaches, and entrepreneurs in the fields of spirituality, psychology, and leadership to share their insights for the expansion of collective consciousness. And today I have a very special guest, Stuart Preston, all the way from Arizona. Welcome to the show, Stuart.
Thank you, Bola. I'm honored to be here.
Stuart Preston says his journey through grief after losing his son to suicide led him to explore self-awareness and healing practices. He leaned into alternative methods like psychedelics and mindfulness to find his way forward. Along the way, he gained insights into emotional mastery and personal transformation, which he now shares in the hopes of helping others on their own paths. That is so powerful. I love that, because really grief is something that we all have to go through at some point in times. And if we do not really decide how we want to work with it, because we've all come to do different things. Some of us will use grief in different ways. And I would love to really hear how he has worked with grief in his life and how he supports others to do so. I'd love to know, Stuart, how did you get to this place? If you give us a bit of your background and how grief has been a theme in your life.
All right. Well, almost 9 years ago, I was living a very normal, typical life, working, married, kids, just worried about the normal things in life, when I got a call from my son's boss letting me know that Ian had not shown up to work. Ian was 19. He was a software engineer and really accomplished and an amazing kid. His business card, his title was Complete Badass. And so he was a special kid. And it was unusual of him to not show up to work. And so, we were all very concerned. And what ended up happening is we discovered that he had taken his own life. He had died by suicide. And it was that moment when somebody asked, I was on a radio show and somebody asked me, when did you know your whole life was going to be completely different? And I told her it was the before the air left that police officer's vocal cords. That as soon as the officer let me know the bad news, I knew nothing would ever be the same again. And that's where my grief journey started. And something I had never dealt with. I had already lost my father and my grandmother, but it was nothing like this level of grief and losing Ian. And so that was almost 9 years ago, December of 2015, that we lost Ian and started me down this path.
Thank you for the vulnerability you've shown to share this story, because honestly, it's one thing for us to lose someone from illness or due to some kind of disorder. It's another thing for us to lose someone who we love, who could not stay any longer for whatever reason. And this is, so it's a different. And how would you classify that difference, Stuart? How would you say, because you may have seen others experience grief of those who have passed from, those who have passed because they were ill or, due to an accident. But how would you differentiate those sorts of experiences from the loss of someone who has passed through suicide?
Yeah, it's pretty remarkable. When suicide, a drug overdose, sometimes murder, a freak accident, when something takes somebody away unexpectedly, it's actually a much more traumatic experience. Because when somebody is dying from an illness, you kind of get to go through the typical stages of grief, which are actually always misapplied, right? The stages of grief came from Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, from denial to acceptance and anger and all these different things. That has to do with being terminally ill yourself, not grieving a loss of somebody else. But when you're dealing with somebody who has a terminal illness and is going to die slowly, you do get a chance to kind of go through some of those stages. You get a chance to go into denial and say, no, it's not going to happen to her, or she'll survive this, or whatever it is. You get to go through a little bit of that. When somebody dies from suicide or murder or a bad accident, it causes trauma because it's so sudden, and there was no opportunity to say goodbye. There was no opportunity to talk to the person. And, your brain tries to reconcile this stuff. It tries to say, like when you hurt yourself, right? So you pull a muscle or you break a leg or whatever it is, your brain says, okay, this is going to be healed. We're going to be okay. It's going to take this long, but we're going to be okay. When somebody's taken away like that, your brain tries really hard, but it can't find an end to the pain. And so it creates its own little trauma because it doesn't know what to do. Its job is to put it in a box and say, this is, in a finite amount of time. And when you're losing somebody like this, it doesn't get to do that. It gets freaked out. And so you end up, it's a neurological process. There's a great book out there called The Grieving Brain by Dr. Mary Frances O'Connor, where she discusses the neurology of grief and how the whole thing works. And it's very fascinating how the brain has models, has memories, and it tries to reproduce those. So I may see some skinny kid in a snapback hat walking down the street, and my brain will say, Ian. And that's not Ian. And then I have to go through the grief of that not being Ian. And I learn, it's neuroplasticity, which I'm sure you're aware of from the work you do. It's, we have to learn. Neuroplasticity happens every day. When you walk around, you can learn, but you can induce it with things like meditation and psychedelics. And so it's that process, that's why losing somebody suddenly like that. And there's an interesting book out there about past life experiences by Dr. Tucker, where he studies people that have had past life experiences. And there's a section in there about suicide and how that has a tremendous impact on the experience of a past life or not being able to even experience a past life. I reached out to his people and they got back to me and said there's not enough data to really understand it. But from what they've seen, somebody who died by suicide, there's a much bigger struggle to identify with that past life and connect to it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think there's definitely a difference, and I really appreciate you sharing that. Because there's a shock, when it's sudden, it's different from when
right.
you actually have time. You have time to acclimatize yourself to that loss. And
right.
Then when they have actually taken their own life, I think suicide is a very interesting pain that we experience because it's there is a helplessness. There's a helplessness that we learn from not being able to do anything to support them, for them not being able to contact us or reach out to us or connect with us to share their pain, and it's never something that we can overcome unless we choose. It's really a powerful modality, a powerful experience that really calls for us to let go of that learned helplessness, let go of that pain. I'd love to know how you did that, Stuart, because you said something. You said your life was not going to be the same. The life you had before you were told your son had passed and the life you have now? What's the difference? What did that experience bring for you?
Well, anybody who's experienced this will know exactly what I'm talking about. It is a shift in reality. So it's almost like being dropped on a different planet or being dropped into somebody else's life. Suddenly there's a shift, and your reality is no longer the same as it was before. And you can almost feel that shift happening. And so that's why I say there was my life before this and my life after this. Yes, I've been through a lot since then. I've been through a lot of healing. I've been through a lot of different experiences to help me learn how to heal with my grief, because there's no healing from it. But that shift required no work or anything, and it's not a good thing or a bad thing. It's just the moment you find out you've lost a child or maybe a sibling, or a close parent, reality just shifts. And it's hard to explain, but it is a literal shift in reality. It's like if somebody came and took, the color blue away, and suddenly all the colors were all different and nothing looked the same, and you'd be like, oh wow, now it's all different. It's the exact same kind of feeling. Your whole reality is different.
What were you doing before? What was your reality? So, say, give us an idea, because I think it's really powerful for us to understand that concept of different realities, different timelines. We're almost like a totally different person. But it would be really good too if we could hear something about the person you were. What were you doing? What was your day to day like compared to what happened or the more recent versions of you? What changes can you say? Because those of us who have experienced this level of grief, it may be something that we want to consider. This particular experience in our lives creates a really sharp jump into a different person. It's a very, very sharp jump. And sometimes when we look at our life before and after, we can come to maybe understand why that experience unfolded in our lives. That is, it's never something that anybody wants to have. But I love what you said is we can come to heal with it. So I would love to know from your recollection, what was life like before, and what couldn't you do afterwards, and what could you do afterwards? What was different in that?
So I have to explain this in what I see as different levels of consciousness. So you've got your soul level of consciousness, your witness, your awareness, whatever you want to call it. It's your soul level, right? And when this happens, when I lost Ian, that is the essential change that happened. It didn't make me a different person. It didn't change who I am or what I did or how I felt. It just changed my soul's reality. On top of the soul, you've got your senses, right? You've got your body and your mind. And so you have these sensory things. And in that shifted consciousness, then you've got a different perception of the senses in the mind. There's suddenly just a different perspective from the soul to the body and the mind. And then, on top of that, then you might have your, emotional level, and all the emotions are different because now you've got grief and pain are covering everything. Absolutely everything in your whole life is painted with this grief. There's nothing that goes on almost ever again that's not painted by this grief. So I don't know that I would say like that the day before Ian died. I can tell you that the day before Ian died, I was a judgmental, conservative-minded, goal-oriented kind of jerk, right? I mean, I wasn't as bad as I'm making myself sound, but that's kind of where I was. After Ian died, the day after Ian died, I probably was still mostly that guy. But I had been broken. I had been cracked. My soul had been bruised, and my consciousness had shifted. The reality for my consciousness had shifted. And I view consciousness as a shared thing. I think you and I come from the same consciousness. We're just different manifestations of that, although I don't love that word, but we're different manifestations of this consciousness. You have your human experience and I have my human experience, and we interact in different ways. And when that consciousness got its own reality shifted, it opened me up to maybe trying some different things. And I ended up trying psychedelics. And through my psychedelic work, that further cracked me open, and that further opened me up to my soul and my consciousness, whatever you want to call it. And reflexively, that came back and affected my human experience. And so today, 8 years later, 9 years later, I love everyone. I want everyone to be safe and happy and healthy. And I feel, and I don't feel it, I know that I'm connected. I know you and I come from the same thing, and we're all one, but we have our own unique human experiences. I have this meat body that I live in, and I have this brain that I work through, and so it's all different. But through that devastating experience, which opened me up enough to try the psychedelic path, psychedelics and then meditation have led me to a point of understanding that maybe I've got more of a purpose to serve and give back. And it can sound corny to some people. I don't know exactly who your audience is. Maybe they're all crazies like me, right? Or maybe we have business people in London or New York City that are like, this dude's a whack. I don't really know who they are out there, but we're all one. And the more that I can, the universe or whatever you want to call it is going to put opportunities in front of me to help. And it's going to say, hey, here's an opportunity. And they're like breadcrumbs for me to stay on my path, or the Tao, the way, whatever you want to call it, right? They're like little breadcrumbs for me. And so it drops these opportunities in front of me. And my work is to pick it up and help. And however I can. And if I do that, then I don't have to worry about other stuff. The universe, will provide and take care of those other things. So I think that's through all this work. Ian's death cracked me open. For the first maybe year, my heart would not beat a full beat. It was like somebody put a vice clamp on it. I couldn't take a full breath. My heart would not beat a full beat. I was like suffocating emotionally and physically from this grief. It just was unbelievably horrible. But because it shifted things, I was more open to trying psychedelics and meditation, which in turn really helped me heal, like I said, and you told me, heal with my grief. And that's been the biggest thing, is to learn to live my grief, to not push it away, to experience it, to when I feel sad, to be with my sadness, and to experience it, to understand it, as opposed to try to shove it away. When I see people, I am not a therapist, okay? I'm not a therapist, and I'm not a psychologist, and I'm not a counselor. I'm not any of those things. I'm just a grieving dad having my own experience, and so I'm not qualified to give anybody any real advice on this. But when I see somebody who is struggling, that they've lost, and I'm in a lot of groups for parents who have lost kids, parents who have lost kids to suicide, anybody who's grieving. When I see somebody who's just stuck, that just can't move forward, my layman's interpretation is that they are not allowing themselves to feel the grief. Because the grief, it can feel like putting your face in a fire, right? You're like, why would I do that? Why would I let myself burn? Why would I let myself feel that bad? But if you don't, I had to let myself feel the grief. I had to be there with it. I had to experience it as much as it hurt. But that just let me process it. And you hear a lot of people out there talk about how bad it hurts and how that's the reciprocal of love, right? The more you love somebody, the more it's going to hurt. And I think that's kind of the point, is I think that it's an odd way of basically saying, of expressing your love for the person that you lost, is allowing yourself to experience that loss and that grief and that sadness, because you're never going to be with this person again, right? It's a line I have in my book. I wrote a book about all this stuff. It's a line in my book that I say that I had to let go of my emotional attachment to Ian's physical presence. But I can be with Ian in love and in spirit and in memories. And until I let him go of the emotional attachment to his physical, he's never going to come walking down the stairs and say something funny to me, right? That's not ever going to happen again. I have to let go of that. When I could let go of that, it really opened up my heart to be able to accept him in love and memories and in spirit. And I think that's the biggest thing is a lot of people are stuck pushing it away, not wanting to experience it because it is terrible, especially for a mom. See, I'm a dad, and I know people like, oh, you can't compare. And I know it's worse for a mother because a mother shares DNA with this kid. This mother grew this kid inside of her and gave birth to this kid and nurtured this kid and was more one with this kid than any two human beings can possibly be, spiritually, physically, whatever. And so I understand. I don't judge somebody who's stuck, but I hope that they will find a way to get through that and allow themselves to truly experience and feel the grief. Because I think that's probably, in my layman's understanding and my own experience, the way that they're going to learn to heal with their grief.
Mhm. Thank you for that, Stuart. I love what you said about how this is something that really sparked a spirituality in you, a spiritual path, because it was, you find, and this is, we all have something that happened, a traumatic event, an experience that, we're forced to dig deep and discover more of who we truly are. And I love what you're saying about consciousness, because consciousness is that infinite intelligence within us. It's a reflection of God. It's an intelligent reflection. So we're allowing ourselves to know more about this intelligent reflection because each of us is a unique piece of that intelligent, and we form a puzzle. We're all part of that puzzle. And I love that you became interested in that. Became more interested in more of your higher self, more of that spirit self, because not everybody has come on that journey. But on Daily Soul Bytes, we really encourage the consideration of the spiritual parts of us that really allow us to know more about our own self. And I love what you said about the different genders. Mothers and fathers feel differently, but it is what it is. I don't think about comparison, but it's important to focus as a parent on your own grief. And I love that you have done that. I would love to know a bit more about what you said in terms of how you came through this. You use psychedelics. You also mentioned emotional mastery. Now, psychedelics, I know, is something that some people frown upon because it's always seen as something that is a leisure activity that can cause harm. But there's also the spiritual aspect and the healing aspect of psychedelics. So I would love to hear a bit about that as to how it helped you to integrate, to feel that energy, the energy behind the grief, and to let it go, knowing that that person that you lost was there for a reason, was there for a season, and they're still there in another way. How did you integrate all of that using the modalities of psychedelics and emotional?
Well, great question. Thank you. The beauty of psychedelics is they don't care what you want and what you think and any of that stuff, right? They're really honestly like a good therapist, right? I had a really good psychotherapist maybe like 30 years ago. And I would walk into his office and sit down and say, here's my problem. And he would just be like, yeah, okay, whatever. You know what I mean? Let's talk about some stuff and get down to what the real problem is. Because what I marched in there and wanting to discuss was a symptom of my problem. It wasn't my problem, right? And so psychedelics are the exact same way. So you mentioned, the social aspect of psychedelics, the party aspect versus the spiritual. And sometimes I don't really divide those. A friend of mine did he ate some mushrooms in a social situation at a burn event. Burn is Burning Man. There's Burning Man events all over the world, and he ate a bunch of mushrooms and had a real spiritual experience. And he wasn't trying to have a spiritual experience. You know what I mean? He just wanted to have a good time and dance and hear music in a different way and see art in a different way. But psychedelics have a way, just like a good psychoanalyst, of cracking you open and saying, here's what we need to look at. And so what happened with me, and yes, there is a stigma. You know, my motivational speaking, my whole purpose in life now is to break stigmas around mental health and suicide and grief and psychedelics. There is a stigma around psychedelics, which I carried and I fought because my dad was a DEA agent. So I grew up thinking that people who did drugs were bad people. And so for me to try this was really not something I never thought I would do. They are illegal here in the States. They're a Schedule I drug. It's illegal no matter what happens. Marijuana is illegal here. People like to think we've legalized it in all these states and everything. It's still federally illegal. It may just be a technicality, but the psychedelics, I think, did open my eyes and my heart and my consciousness to a couple things. Number one, it showed me that we're all one, that we're all connected as one entity. I think there's an author out there, it's either E.E. Cummings or C.S. Lewis. I think it's C.S. Lewis who said, I don't have a soul, I am a soul, and I have a body. Right? And so when psychedelics, you can actually step into that and be in that universal consciousness and be with the ubiquitous love that we all are and look at this human experience and get a better understanding of it. And when one gets that level of perspective, like you have said a couple times here, you understand that this is, one small life in what could be multiple lives of a soul. The same way that a day is just a single day in the life of a human being. And so when you start to see that perspective, life and death take on less of a meaning. I still miss the heck out of my son, and I would want him back. I would give all this back if I could just have him right here. I would give all of this back, all the understanding, all the healing. I lost 60 pounds. I would give all back if I could have Ian just sitting here with me again. That's how, selfish I am. I want him here. I love his smile, his laugh, everything about him. I just want it back. But I also have a different perspective now on what a human life is in the context of a soul. So knowing that we're all connected, right? And it's a line I say in my show, that the Beatles were right, that, all we need is love, because that's what we're, really all connected with love. We're all one. But the other part of that is maintaining that connection also on a human being level, right? And my meatness, you know what I mean? And my mind and my ego and my five senses, I need to connect with other human beings along those lines. I need to connect sensually, and I need to connect emotionally, intellectually, spiritually. And, and even doctors will tell you, if you have good connections to at least two people, you're less likely to develop Alzheimer's. Right. So it's that comes out, in these medical ways. So I think the things that the psychedelics really showed me, that not only did they show me my own crap inside my own psychology, right? Just like a psychologist, it would crack me open and it would show me and go, look at this, what I found inside of you, right? And then I would have to look at that and go, holy cow, I had no idea that this stuff was inside of me. I didn't know that I felt helpless. I didn't know that I myself felt suicidal. I didn't know a bunch of these things. And psychedelics cracked me open and pulled it out and showed it to me. And I was like, well, I need to work on that. And just being able to say it is worth probably a year or two of therapy. For psychedelics to show me what's inside of me, what's inside my ego and my psyche, and for me to turn around and express that out of my mouth using my brain is probably worth a year or two of psychoanalysis. And I say that with all respect to my psychoanalyst who has since passed away, because he's one of the most important human beings in my entire life. But psychedelics have that effect. They can really give you a ton of perspective. And I think that seeing what maybe is actually what actually matters is souls, consciousness, the human experience, and understanding that we need to be connected and we need to open up our hearts to each other. And if you ever read a book like The Body Keeps the Score, about trauma, you realize that everybody's messed up. And it sounds like something somebody would say at a bar or a support group, but people get hurt. Women get hurt more than anybody by men, and people get hurt at war, and babies get hurt, babies get neglected, and almost everybody's got something. So when you see somebody out there who's just acting like a real tool, you can almost look at them from a soul perspective and be like, oh man, I have no idea what this human body went through, but there must have been something there. And so it opens up your heart. You can make a connection even to people driving around with political flags that get your blood boiling. You know what I mean? That you can just be like, okay, that's filled with hate, but I know there's underneath that is a soul that is the same soul that I'm a part of. And I think that all of that for me came from psychedelics. I don't know that anybody could have said to me, oh, hey, you're just a soul and this is your human experience. And you may have several human experiences, and your son Ian had a human experience. And, for some reason he chose that and you chose this. And everything has this purpose, this hidden purpose, which parents of suicide hate to hear that. They don't ever want anybody to say to them, oh, everything happens for a reason. No, you can take that and shove it, right? We do not want to hear that. That's not helpful to any of us, even if it's true. So just please don't say that to anybody. But when you see how a soul operates and what a soul is a part of, that gives you a perspective that can help you understand life and death maybe a little bit better. And knowing that we got to be connected to each other, and we got to find a way to be mindful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's important to actually understand that psychedelics are a modality, a powerful modality, and yes, there's a stigma to it. But I would love to ask you, Stuart, did you find that you had an intention around the use of it, or was it more of just a social thing? Because I really feel that those who may be listening to this, who are willing to try that, there's so many billion modalities all over the world, and there are different ways of seeing things, there are different perspectives of seeing things, and it's really about owning how we receive something that has been said, because everybody has a different perspective. But we will always resonate with those who are here to really support the way we see things. It's all about resonance. It's all about resonance. There's so many different ways of seeing something. And for those who may be watching this and who may be open to trying psychedelics, did you find that you had an intention around using it in a mindful way or not?
Yes, but I'm going to also contradict myself. So I came into it, my intention was to facilitate or have a dreamlike experience with my son in it. Somebody sent me a blog, my wife at the time. She sent me a blog that said the LSD and magic mushrooms can put you into a dreamlike state. And I thought, okay, drugs are bad. People who do drugs are bad people. But I want to be with Ian, even if it's in my dreams. And so I did a ton of research. I researched the four primary things that everybody should consider: the substance, the dosage, the set, and the setting. Set is mindset. Are you ready? Have you prepared yourself to go on this journey? Setting is your physical setting. You know what I mean? Are you sitting in a backyard full of dead plants and just it hasn't been kept up in months, or are you sitting in a nice spiritual space? So substance, dose, set, and setting are very important. And I studied all of that, and I did that, and I prepared that. And I went into it with the intention of being with Ian in my dreams. But here's the ironic thing. And I've been through several mushroom experiences. I've been through several ayahuasca experiences. Peyote out in the middle of the desert here in Arizona. There's been a number of things that I've done, all for the purpose of healing. I have done a couple of things here and there for recreation, because the truth is, taking a small dosage of LSD or mushrooms can really enhance your recreation. You see art in a different way. You can experience intimacy in a different way. There's a lot of benefits from that, and I would never hold that against anybody. But going at it at a spiritual way, understanding those four conditions and being prepared for it. I also discovered, like I alluded to with my therapist, is the psychedelics really could give a crap what your intention is. So I've gone into ceremonies with, saying, oh, my intention is to heal myself, or my intention is to forgive myself. My intention is to connect to my inner soul, or whatever. And the psychedelics are always like, yeah, that's fine, but we've got other things we got to work on. And it'll crack open a different container, and you'll come out of that whole experience and go, whoa, I had no idea that's what I really needed to work on. So instead, these days, if I go into a psychedelic experience, I learned from a good friend who recently lost her battle with breast cancer. I learned from her that you just say, I don't know. I don't know where I'm going to go. I don't know what's going to happen. And that leaves you wide open to experience whatever the medicines have ready for you. So a lot of people out there disagree. They think you need to have a good intention, go into it with an intention. But in general, and they agree with me when I ask them, I say, does your intention really play out when you do it? And they're like, no, not really. Right? Because you're in a whole different state. You're in an altered state of consciousness. So you can't necessarily impose this wakeful state of consciousness onto that state of consciousness. It's going to be a whole different experience. Like when my reality shifted when Ian died, when you go into an altered state of consciousness, it's a different realm. And so it's really hard to take something, an intention, and carry it into that space. Some people do it. Some people say they can do it. I choose not to.
I definitely hear that, and I think it's an individual experience. There is something around knowing exactly how we have been guided to use this very powerful modality. And I also would love to hear about your emotional mastery, in terms of how do you see emotions, and how did you come to a place? Obviously, there was the support that you received from the energetic component of the psychedelics, but there is also the need for us to release some of these meridians, some of these blockages, some of these learned helplessness, these limiting beliefs. There is a need for us to do some work on that. So it's not just about having a moment of that imprint, but there is still work to do. There is still some healing to do, because we are our own healers at the end of the day. So how did you and some of the things I'm sure you speak about in when you have your motivational speaking events. How do you? What's your insight around the transformation that takes place with our energies, with that emotion, the energy emotion? How do you suggest, or what do you share around developing emotional mastery?
So for me, it is about mindfulness. And I didn't really know that until I talked to a psychologist friend of mine, because I spoke for his class. I didn't know him at the time, but I was recommended to him, and I came in and spoke to his death and dying class. And we had a couple of lunches before that just to vet me, to see what I believed. And it really, I personally think, if I'm answering your question properly, that it comes down to mindfulness, and being able to observe your emotions. Because too many times an emotion can come up and overwhelm us and consume us like a monster, right? And then suddenly you're fighting this monster, and you're not really, you don't even understand it. You don't even know what the monster is or how you're dealing with it. And my psychiatrist decades ago said the same thing. One time the hair on the back of my neck was going up, and I was really mad, and he finally helped me see the somatic signs. So you have the body has signs like hair going up on the back of your neck, or your fists clenching, or your heart beating, or your chest being constricted, or what. You have all these signs, physical signs of emotion, right? And then the emotion can come in and really cloud things up and take away your judgment, my judgment. It could take away my judgment. And I think that the key is being able to practice mindfulness, because you can't practice it when you're mad, right? You can't, when you're all mad and angry or hurt or sad or whatever it is, you can't go, oh, hey, this is a great time for me to be mindful. It's too late at that point, right? You got to practice it and practice it and practice it, and then when it comes up, you can be like, oh, I'm gonna sit here with these feelings and these emotions and see what's going on right here, because it's either something going on at the moment, or what I have found a lot of times, an extended emotions, right? I've gone through existential crises where I'm just like, what the heck is going on with my life? I feel lost. I can't focus on stuff. I don't know what's happening. And I have found that those are moments of growth and understanding, that something's happening and I need to be able to find a moment to be mindfulness, to be with the emotions, so that I can understand what is actually happening, what's actually occurring. Like a pile of sand growing and then flattening out again as it reorganizes itself, or the side of a mountain coming off with the rains. Whatever it is that, things are reorganizing inside of me, and I'm feeling the discomfort, and I'm feeling the anxiety, and I'm feeling the tension, and I'm feeling the emotions. And to me, it's I've learned, and I'm not like some yogi, you know what I mean, some meditating monk in Thailand. I'm like normal dude who sometimes eats too much and sometimes drinks too much and sometimes swears at somebody on the highway before I catch myself. I'm just a normal guy, so I'm not trying to preach like, oh, look how perfect I am, because I am so far from perfect. But I've gotten to a point where I can say, oh, I used to get really angry at people. They would drive onto my driveway to turn around and leave these big black tire marks on my driveway. And then I was like, oh, I'm only mad because things are not the way I want them to be. And I have no control over everything. So I can't sit here and be angry just because something isn't the way I want it to be. But I couldn't have figured that out if I didn't have teachers and if I didn't have a moment to be mindful. If I hadn't practiced my mindfulness to be able to sit back and go, yeah, man, that's exactly why I'm losing my stuff, is because, you know what I mean? I'm expecting the world to be different. I'm attached to the world being a certain way. And now I'm way better at handling things that are not going my way, and I almost even like driving on the roads these days, because I can see that we're all one, and when somebody does something stupid or cuts me off, I'm like, all right, brother, it's okay. You know what I mean? It's like, you need to do what you got to do. You got to be who you are at this moment in time. And so I would say, I don't know if I've answered your question or if I'm just rambling, but the mindfulness, I think, is the real key to that mastery that you're talking about. If I didn't have mindfulness, psychedelics led me to mindfulness. My therapist led me to mindfulness. Mindfulness can come from, I think, it can come from kayaking, jogging, archery, whatever your thing is. If you can just get into that space where you're just observing yourself and you're not, the intrusive thoughts are not there, and you're not overanalyzing things, and you're not in a cycle of anxiety. If you can really be in the moment, like Ram Dass, kind of my spiritual teacher, Ram Dass, be here now. If you can really be here now in this moment and not dragged out of this moment by fears or desires or cravings, then you've got an ability to master those emotions and understand them and understand what they might mean. And sometimes they mean something really great, but they don't feel good, but they mean something, some change is coming that's going to be really great.
Thank you for that, Stuart. I totally agree. Mindfulness is so important, because I love what you said about, there is never a time when we no longer have issues or we no longer have any challenges in our reality. We will always have the ups and downs, but it's how resilient we become, what tools we have, what's in our toolkit. And mindfulness is such a powerful tool, because when we are able to see the negative and the positive emotions, or the negative and positive beliefs that we have, we can then be more able, if we choose, it's a choice. We can then choose whether we want to align, because this is all about alignment. That's what my book, the Daily Soul Bytes book, which is now available anywhere books are sold online, in paperback and audiobook. And really, Daily Soul Bytes is talking about the different perspectives that we have within us. The physical ego perspectives, which usually around fear, survival, threat. And then the higher perspectives, which we all have. So usually around love, around forgiveness, around, intimacy, around care, around self-care. And we can begin to understand those different perspectives, the higher perspectives and the low perspectives. And then we can choose to align, because what we align to, what we focus on, what we take action on is what expands, is what creates the day-to-day, is what creates our experience. And we can come to test this out. When someone says something to us and we go down that route of fear and threat and we attack, we will see the outcomes of that. And then when someone does something and we choose the higher perspectives to stay centered, to stay in a place of forgiveness, to stay in a place of trust, we will also see the outcomes of that. And this is really what the adventure of this illusionary matrix is about. It's really about us coming to know how to respond to different things, no matter what happens. And I think mindfulness is really powerful, the way it allows us as observers to really, in all the ups and downs in this physical, egoic matrix, to choose and align with the free will and the freedom that we all have. So I do love that. I also run a SMEET emotional mastery program, which is really around understanding self-awareness, mindfulness, integration, holding space for the different emotions within us, understanding the trauma that we've suffered, understanding it, not judging it, understanding it and showing ourselves love. Because nothing changes without love. We've got to come from that heart-centered place.
Yes.
That transmutation, which is really where we're surrendering to that higher self, that consciousness. That physical ego is consciousness as well. But when the physical ego is driving us, it's a different experience. When the higher self consciousness is driving us, that is another different experience. And we can choose what we prefer. So thank you. Thank you for that wonderful conversation, Stuart.
Thank you, Bola.
I would love to know, Stuart, where people can find you when they want to connect with.
So my main website is Meet Stuart. So it's meetstu.art. Right? Almost Meet Stuart on any of the social handles. Meet Stuart Preston on any of the social handles. I also have a website that focuses on the psychedelic aspect, which is called The Grief Trip. And that also is my book, which is available at all these different places. And The Grief Trip, I have this available as a free PDF also on the website, because I don't want anybody who wants this to not have it. So if anybody out there is deep in grief, from a similar story, it's free. But that's where you can find me, and I'm available to chat if anybody needed anything or wants to share their story. I'm always here to listen.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for joining me today, Stuart.
Thanks for having me, Bola. It was a pleasure.
I would also like to thank all those who are watching, our subscribers, and ask those who haven't subscribed to subscribe. And I want to invite you to check out Stuart's book, The Grief Trip, actually. It's called The Grief Trip, because this is a powerful modality. The psychedelics are a powerful modality, just as mindfulness. And really the experiences that he shares going through that grief and how it does create a very powerful opportunity for us to move through. Because it's not just the experience, it's what we do with it. That is really important. And I love the way that Stuart has transformed his life into this motivational speaker. So I would invite you to connect with that. And I also want to invite those who want to subscribe to us to subscribe and to check out my SMEET Emotional Mastery Program, my book, Daily Soul Bytes. And I do look forward to seeing you on the next episode of the Daily Soul Bytes show. Bye-bye.